You can cut it in afterwards. All right. Good evening, everybody. This is another issue of Kiron Talks online worldwide. Conversational format invented by Dominic Orr and Sabrina Konstop, which you see in the two screens, and our special guest Veronika Dolar, who is originally from Slovenia but now teaches in New York. My name is Tino Brömme. I want to talk a little bit about how's the situation in the US today. Our topic generally is higher education, open education, digital skills, the question how we deal in the crisis with education, and about our personal experiences in this field. Veronika Dolar, professor at SUNY, the State University of New York, Community College. She has a very diverse classroom, a very student body, and this is something that will interest us particularly. But as usual, we start with a little round of everybody saying something, what is going on. So perhaps Dominic maybe, no, Sabrina may start to say what's going on.
Yes, hi everyone. I'm very excited that we already have our seventh session today of Kiron Talks. But as much as we enjoy the format, I think it's also a sad sign a bit because we started this after Corona hit in Germany at least. However, it's been very interesting always to learn about how it affects the different actors and players in all various forms of educational settings and institutions. So I'm super excited to hear about your point of view today and your expertise. Yeah. Dominic, do you want to go on?
Yeah, I thought you were going to tell us maybe an anecdote as well.
An anecdote, a tricky one. We started to do that, but I don't have a funny one to share today, apart from maybe that home office is really training after we've been in it for 2 months now.
Yeah, I would like to just say, I found out now that I'm having fun going to different rooms for each of my meetings now. So I had a meeting this afternoon in the corridor, because I actually hadn't done a meeting there before. So that's kind of the amount of kind of fun you have when you're working at home. But I always think it's good because, Sabrina and I, we're kind of fans of digital learning and we're expecting students to be learning at home. So I think it's good that we're kind of, walking the talk as well and actually have to work at home as well. Tino, is the pitching coming back?
I can say that my working place has changed too. I came from northern Germany, Berlin, to Thüringen now. And I can say that in the last weeks I have, using these online conversational tools, so many people also making interviews and so on, of course, as a journalist. But it's really fun. And okay, I don't want to talk so positively because the situation is really hard for many people and people are worried, no? But, who has a workplace or invents some, like you, Dominic, might be still in a good mood. But Veronika, you said you have a lot of trouble with your children. What trouble are they making?
So
can't you put them into a closet or something?
I tried. So I actually rearranged my basement for a little bit because at one point they were not allowed to go to the basement. So that was the only place they always wanted to go. So I said, okay, that's great. That's going to be fantastic. I'm going to fix up my basement, down in the basement, have a little bit of time to actually do some recording, and that's going to work. And of course, the moment I start talking to somebody, they just start jumping all over the place. They start arguing, fighting. So I was just saying before, if you start seeing smoke behind me, please let me know. I'm a single mom of 3 very small children. So they're slightly unsupervised right now. Their iPads are their entertainment. And as I said, like if I want to talk to them, they're always very, very busy. But the moment I start talking to somebody working, there's always an issue. And of course, there's homeschooling. So that's what I'm doing right now. So just before our talk, we had the same kind of interaction with their teachers, and it's quite a challenge. I mean, most of the time, the only thing that you keep on have to saying is please mute, and now unmute, and now mute, and please unmute. So it's like 15, first graders also working with this technology, and I'm in awe with all the teachers, the kindergarten, first grade teachers, how they're able to keep their calm and cool and do this, and they themselves, they have their families and their kids most of the time. So I really shouldn't be complaining all that much.
No, you should. But,
Okay.
But I thought, why do you say children? I thought you are teaching students and also a very diverse.
Yes. So I just want to correct you a little bit. So I work for the State University of New York, but it's a 4-year college. So it's a public college. It's a 4-year college. And one of the big distinctions of SUNY Old Westbury is it is actually one of the most diverse colleges in the United States. And I think we have gotten an award for diversity probably, I know for sure the past 2 years, probably even before. And typically when in the United States they talk about diversity, they just mean African American. That's usually a synonym. But really with our college, it's diverse in almost any respect, right? So it's the gender, income, class, background, what kind of families they come from, and so on. So that's really, really great diversity. And as I said, like when I teach there, exciting things I can, experience, because you really see like the whole world in a sense, or the America, the United States, the way I sort of envision it, basically, right? Really diverse, all these different points of views, all these different backgrounds and so on. But I mean, it has been extremely challenging. If I just sort of jump ahead with this idea of that, we closed down our campus mid-March. And so different places, approach this issue in various ways. What SUNY Old Westbury decided to do is that they discourage synchronous learning, for example. So in some places, my colleagues, I used to work at a private institution, LIU Post. There, my colleagues were actually mandated that they need to have synchronous learning. So basically replace exactly the same face-to-face classes with online classes and pretend they're all in class. Well, at SUNY Old Westbury, our instruction was exactly the opposite. And that comes from a very practical point of view. The fact is that a lot of our students, they don't have maybe reliable access to Wi-Fi. They might not have. Many of them live in places where, I mean, just like that, like you have, it might have stay-at-home parents. So you have children to take care of, family members that you have to take care of. We are here in New York. They're small apartments, not a lot of space. When and where are you going to be able to just like afford to, go to your class virtually and pretend everything's okay? It's very challenging, right? So a lot of times, I even had office hours, sometimes very late at night. I text with them at 3 o'clock in the morning because that's the only time they actually have in order to correspond. A lot of them might still work. So basically they might work as a result of the crisis. So there are all these challenges. And so basically we decided as an institution that synchronous learning at this point is just too much of a pressure on our students, but we should try to be available otherwise. So it's asynchronous learning, video lectures, and so on. So, and also, I mean, as I said, just basic technology. So I'm also a member of the faculty senate, and so we have a bit more report in terms of what we the president and the provost and everybody was working really hard to make sure that students who didn't have laptops, for example, were able to get one. But then the Wi-Fi is an issue. So I remember I was also I'm part of a bigger group, OER group here at the entire SUNY system. One of the children might be joining us soon. So one of the things that people were actually mentioning is like if they can just drive in front of a public library, sit in their cars, and try to maybe get a Wi-Fi. So we were all sort of brainstorming what are some of the ways that people can have access to this. So that's just a bit of an intro, I guess.
Wow. Okay, that's a whole load of things to unpack, I think. I mean, one point I think it's very interesting when you say you've really focused on asynchronous learning, because that's been a process, I think. If we look at many other discussions at the moment, it seems that most colleges and universities have said, okay, well, normally you have a live lecture, so we must have a live kind of web. But so synchronous is kind of helpful, asynchronous is kind of helpful, so something that's pre-recorded essentially. Have you also then changed the way the lecture is kind of organized? So one challenge we always have at Kiron is when we put recorded material on the platform, we actually know it shouldn't be too long, because if it's too long, you know, you have waning interest, people just don't watch it. So those kind of changes as well.
Yeah, so I'm actually pretty lucky because I actually started to teach quite intensively online maybe 2-3 years ago, and that's when I started to actually record these kind of video lectures. And it was sort of funny for me to actually have this experience, because I think I became a better face-to-face interactions because of my online experience, and because I was recording these tiny little video lectures. So one of the things, for example, I do in most of my class, especially upper level electives, is that they need to learn some technical skills. So for example, how to use Excel to analyze the data, to come up with a graph and so on. So back in the days, what I used to do is I used to reserve a computer lab. I got everybody down into the computer lab, and I was basically doing the instructions live, basically. And then it's just very difficult too, because I mean, sometimes the speeds are different and somebody gets a different kind of a problem than another person. But that was sort of the idea, right? I mean, it slows it down and you can address every single issue at a time. And then I recorded those kind of lectures for my online class, because I said, look, my online students should learn the same type of skills. Just because I can't see them doesn't mean that they shouldn't be learning the same type of material and skills. So I started to record these video lectures, but I said, well, I have these lectures, I might share them with the students in my face-to-face class. And what actually started to happen, and that's when I realized this kind of difference in technology and what kind of teaching and pedagogy you can use, is that as I was trying to teach them how to do certain things in Excel, students would be rather listening to my mini recorded lectures as opposed to me. Right? So it was sort of around, like, well, here I am, you can ask me, you know, like, I'm trying to show you this live. And they actually found it easier to just listen to that. And one of the beautiful recorded stuff is that you can pause it and you can rewind it. Mm-hmm. And this is something that a lot of us who are so used to just like lecturing or dealing with people face to face just don't realize the power of that, right? And also many times, like students, they look down, they look up, I do something, they miss it. While recorded, they can really pause it, they can rewind it, and there's no shame in that, in a sense too, right? Because many times in the face-to-face class, right now I'm talking specifically about like these technical skills, right? But it applies for everything, right? They might not feel comfortable asking a very basic, trivial stuff, but if it's recorded and they just missed it and I define something and I use the term or something like that, they can pause it, go back, 10, 15 seconds, and oh, that's what she said. Oh, that's what this is. So using this kind of new technology and asynchronous learning, as I said, it's quite powerful, but you have to sort of change the point of view, right? And I could also speak a lot faster. I could go over this stuff because I know that, and I tell them. So I have one of the lectures.
No, you couldn't speak any faster. That's impossible.
I am.
No.
This is me holding back.
I don't believe that.
This is me holding back.
Let me ask. I see this asynchronous also. I mean, let me ask a provocative question. Asynchronous, recorded learning, blended learning. Don't you? I mean, how do you see this? What do you feel about it? Is it only positive? Because I have a feeling here is also kind of a downgrade. Not your teaching, no, but the necessity now is kind of a downgrading of it. And you are a teacher, like many teachers also now, who adapt to the situation and who always adapted to the situation, who always adapted to maybe bad equipment or not enough money for the schools, not enough teachers for the kind of diverse students, and they are adapting to a bad economic situation for the education facilities, and you do now too, and you accept everything like this. How do you feel about it? I mean, this is not only just a practical thing, no?
Right. I mean, so one of the things is that we've been experiencing here at SUNY Old Westbury, even in regards in terms of OER, is this idea that basically we're just now context creator, and we just dump all this material out there. And so what do you need professors and teachers anyways? Like, what's the value added, right? So obviously that's a big issue. So, and in fact, if you don't think that if you feel that the technology can so easily replace you and your class experience, then you should take a little bit of a soul searching when it comes to teaching, I guess. Things that I think, so asynchronous learning, obviously it's very good just because of these like technical skills. It's recorded, people can go back and so on. But again, one of the things that it's sort of forgotten, and here we're all just sort of thrown into that, is that it takes a certain type of skill and a certain type of a student to be able to master this type of an environment, right? I mean, this is not for everybody. And in fact, students at my college, I think, are especially those who college students, they have very, very diverse background and not so much of a family experience when it comes to going to college. So they really need a lot more hand holding when it comes to that. And this is where I think professors, we actually add quite a bit. So, and again, like, there was a major difference in terms of, like I taught an online course, and people who sign up for an online course, they knew what's going on because they were like, it's a self-selection, right? I mean, they knew what to expect. But people who sign up for regular face-to-face classes to be just expected halfway through the semester to just become online learners, I mean, that's quite a bit, right? So I think there is a skill that's involved. There's a lot of time management skills that students need to sort of be aware of, or we need to help them. And top of just having this asynchronous part, I mean, I have office hours, like I meet with students online, I share my screen with them, we work on this one-on-one. So it's just like any other office hours, except that we are meeting remotely. So just like I'm like talking to you right now, I still talk to my students. So there is the face-to-face interaction, which I think but the main course of the material, the sort of the technical skills or just sort of definitional skills are there. And finally, I think just to add to this, at the end, what actually matters for learning is sort of kind of this discussion and reflection and getting the big picture. And this is where the interaction with students, with each other, and with me actually matters quite a bit. So, and that's my cat in the background. You can probably hear her. She's not very loud.
That's cute. No, but like, it just got me thinking, right? I mean, in the end, it doesn't have to be like one-on-one the same content, right? In your case, it is because you recorded the online session to yourself, and it's probably like a mirror, right, to what you would teach.
Can you just wait for a second? I think it goes on forever.
You should feed it once in a while.
Yeah. And she's tiny. She eats a lot. Just a second. Give me a second.
No
I need
problem. No problem.
Okay.
That's fine. But I will have to wait to ask her that specific question.
But I think this is really interesting also just to hear kind of, because Veronica's kind of also an expert on how to offer this online learning. So it would be interesting to hear also. We can't hear you yet.
I'm just trying to showcase the realities of this kind of working at home. That's the reason. It was all planned.
Studying at home. I mean, this is this is not only relevant actually for the whole question of synchronous learning. Now, I'm just going to throw in a word. Think about online proctoring. If you were doing an exam now, this would be a really big problem, because they would have thought you'd have some answers now. Anyway, I just want to pass back to Sabrina because she was asking a question.
So sorry, yes.
No worries at all. No, I was just trying to say, I mean, depending on who you talk about, right? But our students on the Kiron campus, like often if they enter higher education in Germany, they're not native German speakers, right? So something like that is also what we observed in some of our students, right? If they take an introductory course on business or economics or whatever, then it can happen that they watch our course online in English, although it's from a completely different institute, right? And maybe even not like perfectly matching what they're supposed to learn, but it still helps them to understand like the issues and the complexity of it. Would you think then that's a way to go ahead, like how we could also support learning? Because in the end, like what I got in my studies, it was texts, right? And books and whatnot. And then you had, like in my case, political science, like, 300 pages of essays from one week to the other. But I never felt like that 100% supported my progress on the subject, right? So maybe that's also a different way of making education more valuable for everyone in the end, because everyone has their own pace and their own way of learning.
Yeah, so I mean, in my case, I mean, there's still the regular textbook that the students can read. There are my lectures. There are other lectures that they can find some other, YouTube material, other things that are available, or some other open education resources that are out there. One of the things, and again, this is where we're in a somewhat privileged position, is that again, SUNY Old Westbury, again, I think about 2 years ago, they got a contract with a Panopto. That's again another like lecture capture software that actually does the subscripts as well. So basically, as I speak, and easy accent, it still gets quite a bit of it right. So you can do the lecture captures, you can do that. So that helps, because that's also for people, that are disabilities in a sense, right? So there are some other options out there that, in fact, provide more access in some ways to a lot of students. But again, I still want to come back to the idea that we shouldn't kid ourselves to think that, well, I put everything out there, it's clear they should just do it, and why do they not do it, and why do they not complete all the assignments or anything like that. I mean, that's where basically this personal contact actually helps, right? So I typically email students, try to send them messages, try to be in contact to see what's going on, to motivate them, to basically tell them, this is where things are, and so on. And again, the question here is, do you need a professor? I'm going to be critical about that too, right? I mean, do you need a professor to do that, or just need a coach, right? So that's, again, they just need somebody who is getting you through the material, like a life coach or a sort of time manager, or do you actually need a professor who then answers also the questions that you might have? Another thing that I would like to mention is that, this is where I think the system, the way the undergraduate studies are done, I would guess in most of the European countries, as opposed to United States and Canada, is that classes, the classes here resemble high school a lot more compared to just like regular large university lectures. So basically, we're already accustomed, to this weekly readings. I take attendance of my classes, right, every single time. And so basically, I believe the way you learn is like, you have to take sort of smaller steps to build to a bigger picture altogether, as opposed to just leave it until the end and hopefully you pass somehow, right? So we have been practicing this here quite a bit. Now the question is, how do you do that, right? How do you maintain this kind of rigor throughout the session? You don't see the students, and again, like this is where I suffer greatly. I'm not actually a very good person. I'm horrible. I don't talk on the phone. I'm very, very bad with these kind of meetings. I am the face-to-face person. I feel that this like human interaction really matters a lot. So I feel like I'm completely handicapped, right? So standing in front of the class, motivating students, asking them, challenging them, pushing them to actually do the work that normally they would not, is really, I think, my forte right now, right? So, and this is something that I think can be. It is a problem, and a lot of students can just basically fall through the cracks as a result of that.
And you are, though, actually an expert in a way on how to organize this online learning, because, as you said, you've done it for a long time before. So do you see practices with other lecturers and how they're coping with it? Because the one already about digital skills of the students, but also, we were making a joke recently that there's the so-called PDF university. So even worse than kind of, the Zoom thing is just like, okay, just like somehow get them content and then we're okay. So how do you see that at the moment?
Yeah, I think a lot of the faculty, just like a lot of students, were completely, to be dealing with this in a sense, right? And it's nobody's fault really, and I think it's just a shock. And yes, one of the things that I've been talking to with one some of my colleagues is basically this distinction between online learning and remote learning, right? So when I was preparing my online class, I had time. I knew that I'm teaching this class, so I was able to organize it differently, think about different kinds of assignments, prepare these video lectures ahead of time. Here, what we have done is basically within a week, we had to be ready to prepare a course that is a remote learning, right? And, in this kind of, under this crazy circumstances, PDFs, I guess it's sometimes the best you can do. Then there's also what platform to use to navigate this stuff. Who's to use? So we use Blackboard or like other LSM systems, learning management systems, and a lot of faculty didn't know how to use it. So here again, SUNY Old Westbury was very proactive. You could get we have one of the to help navigate using Blackboard in an instant, and again providing all these tutorials to just get you online and try to work with that. A lot of faculty is helping each other. In some places they sort of mandated that faculty work in pairs already, right? So that you're basically paired with somebody that is going to help you, that's going to be there to provide some guidance. Sometimes this is, at some colleges, this is done in an organized way, and some places this is based on, external solution that faculty sort of finds, like, you have done this before, please help me, can you help me teach these courses, and so on. So I think everybody's sort of trying to chip in. With us, one of the issues also I should be mentioning too, which has to do with economics, is the shock to the adjunct faculty, right? So adjuncts now represent such a large faction, part of who's teaching undergraduate courses. These are it's I would rather call them contingency faculty in a sense, right? I mean, they're just basically there when you need them. They're there to teach more classes. When you don't need them, you got rid of them. They don't typically get the benefits. Their wages are extremely low, and now all of a sudden they've been pushed to actually do all this extra work. And then the question is this fair again? Like, I mean, it has to do with fairness, with the pay, opportunities, and so on. And so it's another sort of like a big issue that a lot of the universities are sort of dealing with. And faculty, especially in SUNY and CUNY, City University of New York, there has been a lot of push to make sure that they're additionally compensated for all this crazy work that they're doing on top of, unexpected work that they didn't.
So they've become.
Veronika, do you have like an overview? I mean, you talk about the United States, maybe that's too big, but you're in the state of New York. Do you have an overview of the situation? If there's economical difficulties for the universities and for the schools, how teachers deal economically and with their time management? Can you give a little bit of an overview also? I mean, I don't get really in what kind of like context you're working.
Yeah, so I mean, we can start broadly. We can talk about United States as a whole, right? So we have this system of private four-year colleges and then public four-year colleges and public two-year colleges, right? So that's the system that sort of prevails here in the United States. And one of the big trends, especially over the past 5 years, has been the change in the demographics. So there are just not as many. The system was really sort of propped up and built during the baby boomers' time, right? And since then, typically students that are coming in, it's shrinking and shrinking. Everybody's fighting for the smaller number of students that are available in the United States, and mostly private colleges are struggling quite a bit. Long Island, where I work, it's probably ground zero when it comes to that, right? I mean, Long Island was one of the places where the population really boomed. They built all these colleges, private and public, and now there's simply not enough. There are not enough high school students, and pay for all this tuition. So colleges are struggling. I just got these statistics in the news from yesterday. 345 private colleges are at risk of closing or merging, and they really are struggling, right? So they're trying to cut costs where they can, and it is a struggle. So basically, this is going to be, this crisis is going to have some really severe consequences on the higher education here in the United States, simply because many colleges and universities will probably have to close or completely. We have been seeing this trend over the past 5 years. I think on average there's about like 2 or 3 colleges that close every year, and a lot more is still big. And this was before the crisis, right? This was during the periods of growth, in a sense, right? So I can just imagine this is going to get a lot worse. Another thing that is also happening a lot, especially in colleges, is that they're trying to get rid of tenure, obviously. and just to make sure that there's a lot more flexibility, that they can get rid of when some programs become less popular, and they want to rely a lot more on adjuncts because they're just so much cheaper, and it's much easier to get them during the semesters when you need them and not pay them when you don't need them. So they're all struggling as a result of this.
I also have a special question. When Trump came into power, he also cut the budgets of the NEA and the NEH, so the National Endowment of the and the other one, and who are both institutions who help the schools where they have no art education and so on. No, and they are now, I think, practically gone. No, did it have an effect? I mean, you are in an arts college, right?
It's a liberal arts. It's mostly liberal arts college. Yes, exactly. It's a public liberal arts college.
Did the funding policy for higher education or for education since the new American government influence your situation?
So luckily for us, because there's a federal system and then there's a state system here in place, and luckily for us, the state at the time, for the time being, basically shielded us quite a bit. So the governor Andrew Cuomo, basically. That's like 2 years ago now, I think 2 or 3 years ago, announced this Excelsior Scholarship, which basically means that for people that meet certain financial criteria, the income criteria, they have free pass for community colleges, but also for four-year colleges. So we were the first state in New York, in United States, to basically provide full scholarship for four-year education. So of course, in Germany, it doesn't make any sense to you guys, but this is a pretty big breakthrough here in the United States. Now the question is, what happens now, right? So New York has been hit so heavily, and in fact, I was just giving another, just to sort of twist it around. It's not really answering your question, but it's an interesting fact. So in terms of the unemployment claims, right? I think the southern states are the ones that are really hit the most right now because of the pandemic and the lockdown of the economies, right? I think Louisiana and Georgia, their unemployment rates are about like 30%, which is during the Great Depression, right? 1929, 1930, unemployment rate was about 25%. So they're above those rates already. New York State, actually, it's number 16 or 17 on the list. So even though in terms of the policies that we have taken, in terms of the in terms of how many cases, we're like epicenter here for coronavirus epidemic in the world, right? So New York City. And yet the unemployment hasn't been that drastically changed and compared to some other states. And part of it is because of the SUNY, actually, State University of New York. This is the largest employer in the state, and then they have CUNY and so on. And, the governor basically said, nobody's going to get fired, nobody's going to get hired either. But, things are going to stay in place as it is. That's why I have to say that I'm in the most privileged position. Really, my paycheck still keeps on coming in. I have a job. There's quite a bit of security compared to everybody else. Here's where you see the public policy at the state level. At the federal level, it's a whole different story, and you can read it in the news. This is recorded. I will not comment more on it, I guess.
But we should talk about another thing that Sony is well known for, which is also the work on OER and on open educational resources. So we've talked about these a few times. So I just mentioned it briefly, they're educational materials licensed, which also means two things: that you can normally have a cost-free access to them, and secondly, you redevelop them, or it's very easy to change them and adapt them to certain processes. I find OER in this situation quite interesting, because we already talked about the fact that we're in a bit of a situation now where the knee-jerk reaction of higher education to the COVID crisis has been, okay, the first thing I have to do is push content to people. And in a way, the OER has always been saying the content is not the content, it's the beginning of a process. I know you've been quite active in the OER area, and just to mention it for people who don't know the American system so well, OER is also a very important element of the American system these days, because it's also a way to get cheaper access to at least the learning materials. So maybe you could say a bit to OER in the context of COVID and also in the context of the economics of education?
Right. So, I mean, so let's start with economics, basically. So again, as I mentioned, I used to work for the private university here on Long Island, and the tuition there, it's probably right now it's more than like $35,000 per year for one academic year. That's just basic tuition, and so the expectation is that people who go there can afford it a little bit more easily. So I usually used my textbooks. I signed it, publisher assigned textbooks, and that basically was my life. Once I got a job here in the public system, and I sort of started to look at who are my students, to realize that basically for a lot of them, the money they would be spending on textbook is 3, 4, 5 times higher than the money on anything else related to their higher education. It just seemed outrageous, right? So at that time, and again, luckily for me, was literally the year when SUNY started to promote open educational resources. So I attended a lot of the seminars. And then soon after, again, Governor of New York passed a bill, I think we got $8 million, so $4 million for CUNY, that's City University of New York, and $4 million for SUNY, to somehow promote, develop, get faculty on board to start to adopt this stuff. And I think this was related to the fact that we have this Excelsior scholarship, right, where people are not paying for the tuition, so they can go to college. The problem is once they get there, they can't pay for any of the textbooks. They need to actually be successful in college, right? So this clearly makes behind it. And just to sort of put in perspective, so my econ textbook, introductory microeconomics textbook that I've been using, for the new edition, it's about like $280. For the public policy book, which I just simply love, I thought it was like the best book ever, it's $340, right? So with even though, and this was the first time teaching, and I just knew the headaches I'm going to have in order to create all this content, put it together. I just find it, I just couldn't do it, right? I mean, for many reasons, it just seemed that it's unfair to expect something like that from students who really cannot afford any of this stuff, and struggling with hunger, with homelessness, and so on, and then to assign a book that it's $340. It just seems outrageous. So luckily, again, for us is that we got so much support. We got so much help from the state in order to promote it. And SUNY, again, is sort of a leading institution when it comes to that. So we had the seminars. And again, the step here, the way we were approaching this, and I should also acknowledge that co-chair of a OER committee here at SUNY Old Westbury, where I am actually working with faculty trying to promote it at my institution. So the project we were taking, that was suggested to us, is basically let's get people first to just adopt a textbook, an open educational textbook for some sort of intro courses, so they can sort of get an idea where this is going. Because once you start working with OER, there are these like 5 R's that a lot of people sort of mention, that you can reuse, remix, 3 others. I guess I didn't study hard enough for this webinar. Reuse, remix, retain,
revise.
Okay, anyways, revise. Anyways, so repurpose. Something
We
like
might sell probably.
No. There's nothing to sell here. It's all free. So I mean, you can always publish your own work if you want. But so one of the things for me that was very, very beautiful for that was the fact that I can actually remix the material. Right, I have a publisher provided textbook. Typically, those are the chapters. That's the order of the book, and I can never teach in that order. Like the way I sort of think about certain issues, I want to sort of skip chapters and sort of disorganize and so on. Well, now I have this textbook, and I just said, like, I think last semester in the fall, I had my perfect textbook because it was this open educational text I've been playing around for 2 semesters. So everything is as it should be, the way it is in my head, the way I lectured, the way I can explain it to my class. So the textbook is there. And there's material in economics. There's a lot of things that it seemed that the issue is settled. So I teach also on the minimum wage, for example. There's a lot of but when you read the intro textbook, it seems that there is no debate. I mean, minimum wage is bad, and that's it. Case closed, right? So then you can really add things to it a bit, as opposed to just having whatever it's provided. So that already changes the way you teach, right? So to be engaged with that material. But then on top of that, one of the things that I'm engaged and I'm trying to sort of promote with other faculty too is basically this idea of open pedagogy. And open pedagogy is basically when not only that I'm using these textbooks and I'm changing it, but I mean encouraging students to participate in my class very differently. So just to give an example, the class that I was just teaching this semester, it's a new class. It's called Public Finance and Public Policy. That's the textbook, right? The $340 textbook that I didn't use. So since I didn't have a textbook, well, we sort of wrote it together with my students in a sense, right? So what I have done, especially after the shutdown, is I have created this quite detailed web page with all the material that they can access. The material there might not be OER, basically just links to the newspapers, to the articles written by the economists and so on. So it's not all OER. What is OER is the assignment that goes with it, right? So basically they have access to the OER textbook that I have created, but there's this OER assignment. And this is where a lot of that's the content that also matters, right? So it's not just the textbooks and this basic material. It's really how do you then engage students with the material itself, right? So it's this big assignment, and this assignment really has to do with the analysis of COVID, right? COVID-19
Must
pandemic.
be a really beautiful book for $350. I would really like to be able to afford it.
Yes.
Dominic, you are yourself. I mean, it's not nobody knows. I mean, I don't know enough about Kiron and the work you're doing. However, we have to wrap up, which is now coming to an end. But Dominic, please tell us a little bit more. How Kiron, how do you relate to open education resources as a means to make education accessible for many more people who elsewhere wouldn't be able to? Or are you trying to save money for the federal budget? What's your true intention?
I mean, really, it's. I mean, I think Veronika has made a very good case, a very strong case for OER. The reason why OER are interesting is not really for this point. It's for the point that comes afterwards, for the repurposing. So what's interesting for us is if we're trying to develop learning programs, we can also have our students in focus and think about, okay, so there is some learning materials which we can start using, but how can we make sure that they fulfill the purpose for our students? And what we haven't managed yet is the second point you were mentioning, Veronika, which I think is very important. Include the learners in the production of the learning materials. This is really quite a difficult thing, or we found it difficult to do this in the environment of a learning platform. But it is a really huge challenge, which I think is what we will be to move forward to, because what we know is what Veronika was saying as well is, it's about interaction. It's about also including learners in contributing to the learning experience. And that's a super connection to what we were talking about last week when we were talking about how can you become a member of a community, and you become a member by contributing to it. And I think this is something which is really important for learning, especially now. So I'm actually pleased I also have the feeling now we're interrupting a debate somehow, because it was really great to hear all of your things. We've touched on a lot of many issues. We also had a few comments in the chat who were saying, okay, basically they were saying, can you just talk about some of those things for a bit longer? But I also think, part of our purpose, we just want to introduce these debates. But I would like to just mention before I pass on to Sabrina that also what you've mentioned, Veronika, we'll put links to all of those in the video as well, so people can find all of those things you've mentioned, because I think they are super relevant. Sabrina.
Totally. I mean, I'm also super overwhelmed with all the issues that you talked about, right? And I feel we need you in a different lecture again. Actually, maybe for Kiron ourselves. Let's see if we will have others listening in as well. But what I love about that is right, that we can get to in the future if we have more OER content. Because if you talk about like public financing, for example, or policy work or whatever, I mean, the point of view that you might have on it could be a bit different than someone would teach it in Berlin, right? So I feel that's the next step of learning if we go beyond individual lectures and then enable this mixing and matching of knowledge, like in the same subject, but across country borders, right? And that's also what we discussed last week about like a more borderless university. And I feel that's very possible.